The epic saga of Spider-Man's brand new day kicks off in the most somber way imaginable. We find our friendly neighborhood hero, Peter Parker, completely isolated and hunkered down in his cramped, messy little apartment. He is just sitting there in silence, lost in his own thoughts. He is absolutely drowning in deep sadness and depression, and honestly, we all know exactly why Spidey is feeling this miserable. Ever since that catastrophic spell he cast with Doctor Strange in the previous chapter, he lost absolutely everyone. The entire world, including his absolute closest friends, has had their memories completely wiped clean of Peter Parker's existence. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth didn't he just go back and reintroduce himself to them? Well, Peter is currently consumed by guilt. He's still completely devastated over the tragic loss of his beloved Aunt May, blaming himself entirely for her death. In his mind, keeping his distance is the only foolproof way to guarantee his friends stay safe. As long as they remain far away from him, they are out of the line of fire. Over the past few grueling years, Peter has had zero personal life. All he does is fight crime day and night. His only real contact in this crusade is a detective he affectionately refers to as the Dire Wolf. She's a sweet, hardworking lady who tries her best. Even though she's just an ordinary person, she does everything in her power to help Spider-Man clean up the streets. This is basically Peter's entire existence now in a nutshell. He wakes up, tinkers with his suit, upgrades his web shooters, goes out to bust some low-level street thugs, and then heads back to his lonely room. On his way back, he occasionally bumps into his neighbor, a girl who clearly has a massive crush on him. But Peter completely ignores her advances because his heart still belongs entirely to MJ, the love of his life. He goes to sleep, wakes up the next day, and tortures himself by watching online videos of his old best buddy, Ned. He watches Ned and MJ posting these incredibly fun, happy videos together on social media, living their best lives without him. Heartbroken, he puts his mask back on to lose himself in crime fighting. He's been dealing with some seriously heavy hitters lately, including the incredibly dangerous Scorpion, and even a bizarre brain-sucking villain. He's also been constantly clashing with the Hand, a sinister clan of highly trained shadow ninjas. Because Spider-Man has saved the city and helped the government countless times, his reputation as a legendary hero has skyrocketed. Yet, nobody knows the man behind the mask. Even his close ally, Detective Dire Wolf, has no clue who he really is. Despite all his heroic fame, the crushing weight of loneliness is tearing him apart. Seeing his best friends from afar and not being able to walk up and say a simple hello is pure torture. He's so visibly miserable that even Detective Dire Wolf noticed it, telling him straight up that he looks incredibly lonely and desperately needs to find some friends. She warned him that he couldn't survive living like an isolated ghost forever. But before they could dive any deeper into that heavy conversation, an urgent police alert flashed on his device. A dangerous criminal operating a literal military tank was tearing through the city center. In an instant, Peter threw on his Spider-Man suit and swung into action. He raced downtown and immediately spotted the massive armored tank rolling through the streets. He launched an aggressive pursuit, successfully dismantling its heavy machine guns first, and then threw a pair of high-tech bombs at it. But the armored beast barely slowed down, heading straight towards a crowded tourist bus threatening to slice it in half. Acting fast, he anchored a web line to the tank and attached another to a heavy streetlight pole, pulling with every ounce of his superhuman strength to drag the vehicle off course. Thankfully, he saved the tourists. But just as he was about to secure the tank, a heavily armed car sped onto the scene, firing explosive grenade launchers directly at the vehicle. Peter rushed over to intercept the rogue vehicle to see who on earth was behind the wheel. Lo and behold, it was none other than the legendary Frank Castle, the Punisher himself. Frank was relentlessly hunting down this tank to destroy it, prompting Peter to yell out, "Look, Frank, I can't have you showing up to turn every single crime scene into a war zone." Frank, completely ignoring Spider-Man's pleas, aimed his grenade launcher directly at Peter and blasted him away to get him out of the way. The heavy explosion sent Peter flying through the air, but our resilient hero shrugged off the impact, quickly using his webs to turn himself into a human slingshot and launching right back into the fray. He rocketed straight toward Frank's vehicle, hitting it with such immense force that the Punisher was thrown completely clear of the car. With Frank temporarily sidelined, Peter was free to resume his high-speed chase after the runaway tank. He pursued the armored vehicle for several blocks until it headed straight toward a secure military facility. The tank was about to smash through the gates at full speed when Peter delivered a massive, devastating kick, sending the entire multi-ton tank airborne. It crashed violently through the facility's outer walls and finally ground to a halt inside. Heavily armed soldiers immediately surrounded the wreckage, but Peter urged them to hold their fire. Peter carefully approached the vehicle and pried open the heavy top hatch, expecting a dangerous terrorist. Instead, he was met with a shocking sight. A seemingly innocent, frail old lady was sitting in the driver's seat. She looked at him and eerily said, "Hello, Peter," before a strange, glowing spectral entity suddenly exited her body and possessed a nearby guard. Peter stood there completely baffled by this bizarre paranormal display. As he rushed to subdue the newly possessed soldier, the supernatural force jumped out of him and entered a third soldier, and then a fourth. It was jumping from person to person in a split second. Peter tried desperately to contain it, but the entity was simply too fast. The elusive spirit kept leaping from host to host until it reached someone positioned high up on the rooftop. Shockingly, that person was Mac Gargan, also known as Scorpion, whom Peter had captured earlier and who was currently being loaded onto a high-security transport helicopter. Suddenly, the entity split itself into two distinct parts. One half of the mysterious spirit quietly slipped into Scorpion's body without anyone noticing, and the transport helicopter immediately took off into the sky. Peter assumed the threat had escaped into the clouds, but when he turned around, he realized the other half of the spirit was still possessing one of the ground soldiers. He pinned him down, demanding to know who he was. In a desperate move, the entity attempted to leap directly into Peter's body to possess him. However, due to some mysterious resistance, perhaps Peter's own incredible willpower or arachnid biology, it failed completely. Realizing it couldn't take over Spider-Man, the spirit vanished into thin air, leaving Peter standing there utterly confused. He was left standing amidst the absolute chaos and destruction caused by this body-hopping phantom, with absolutely no clue where to turn next. Moments later, Detective Direwolf arrived on the scene, demanding an explanation for the madness. Peter quickly told her he would investigate and get back to her with answers as soon as possible. He didn't waste a single second and immediately headed straight for a luxury jacuzzi. No, he wasn't taking a relaxing spa day. He went there because he knew it was the current hangout spot for Yelena Belova, the formidable new Black Widow. As soon as he found her, he asked if she had heard about the chaotic tank incident downtown. Yelena smirked and told him that she and her brand new team of Avengers don't waste their precious time on petty, low-level street crimes. Peter sighed and replied, "Look, this isn't just some ordinary street thug. I just fought a literal body-snatching spirit that jumps from one host to another, and I don't have a single solid lead to follow." Hearing this, Yelena's tone sharpened. She pointed out that the military facility the tank was targeting wasn't just any random army base. It was actually a major operations center for damage control, the government agency. She revealed that this was incredibly the fourth time this month that a damage control facility had been targeted. These highly aggressive raids were becoming a pattern. What's even more suspicious is that right after the tank attack was thwarted today, someone executed a massive cyber breach on Damage Control's secure mainframe. The mysterious hacker wasn't looking for weapons. They were searching for a highly classified, strange codename, VMAX. Peter looked at her, completely puzzled, and asked, "VMAX? What on earth is that supposed to be?" Yelena shrugged and admitted she had absolutely no idea, stating that was the extent of her intel. She suggested he pay a direct visit to Damage Control if he wanted answers. Peter thanked her, left her to enjoy her hot tub, and set off. With a solid lead in hand, Spider-Man swung across the city skyline and headed straight to the highly secure Damage Control headquarters. Thanks to his legendary status as a hero, the security guards let him slide right through the front doors without any hassle. He was immediately greeted by Bill, the director of the facility. Before Peter could even bring up the VMAX database hack, Bill insisted on giving him a grand tour of the massive facility. As they walked through the corridors, Peter was utterly shocked to see members of the notorious Hand Ninja clan working peacefully alongside the government personnel. Bill smiled and explained the bizarre alliance. Bill claimed that after their grand leader was killed, they realized these highly skilled ninjas were just lost souls with no direction or purpose. Instead of treating them as enemies, Damage Control decided to recruit them, giving them a positive outlet for their training. Peter found this explanation hard to swallow, but remained silent. For those who aren't familiar with the Hand, they are a legendary, highly disciplined clan of ninjas clad in crimson robes. As the tour continued, Bill proudly showed Peter a vast array of high-tech weaponry and advanced containment devices. He explained that these tools were specially engineered to neutralize and manage individuals possessing dangerous, superhuman abilities. Sensing his opportunity, Peter cut straight to the chase and asked Bill if he had ever heard of something called VMAX. Bill's expression remained perfectly neutral as he claimed he had never heard that name in his entire life. Peter's spider sense was tingling, making him highly suspicious, so he decided to leave the facility immediately. After slipping out of his suit, Peter sat down at a quiet local cafe to enjoy a warm cup of coffee and clear his mind. He quickly called Detective Direwolf, asking her to run a deep background check on Bill. However, she told him to focus on Scorpion instead, who had just escaped from custody. Peter promised they'd find him. Just as he hung up, he spotted his old best friend, Ned, buying some items at the very same shop. Overwhelmed by emotion, Peter discreetly followed Ned down the street, leading him straight to a lively housewarming party. He quickly realized that Ned and MJ had just moved into a brand new apartment together as roommates. Before you get any ideas, no, they are just strictly platonic friends living together. Peter quickly grabbed a bouquet of fresh flowers, pretending to be a friendly new neighbor who just wanted to offer congratulations. Upon entering, he noticed Ned's bedroom door was wide open, revealing walls covered in Spider-Man posters. A spark of hope flared in Peter's chest. Did Ned somehow remember him? But those hopes were instantly crushed when Ned walked in and said, "Oh, you're looking at my collection. I'm Spider-Man's biggest fan. He's saved my life so many times. I even developed a custom app called Spidey Tracker to follow his heroic exploits." Ned explained his ultimate dream was to meet the web slinger in person, take a picture, and thank him properly. Peter felt a bittersweet warmth knowing his friends still admired his alter ego, and he desperately wanted to tell Ned the truth. However, his thoughts were cut short when MJ suddenly walked into the room. This was only the second time Peter had actually laid eyes on MJ since the memory wipe, and his heart was pounding with nervous energy. He handed her the flowers with trembling hands. She politely thanked him and went back to hosting her guests. But the real heartbreak was about to shatter Peter's soul into a million pieces. As he stood there, he watched MJ walk over and affectionately embrace another young man. Peter immediately realized this was MJ's new boyfriend. The sight hit him like a physical blow, filling him with a devastating wave of jealousy, grief, and ultimate loneliness. Unable to bear the agonizing pain, he quietly slipped out of the party. He stepped out into a pouring rainstorm, too emotionally broken to even put on his suit. He began recklessly leaping from rooftop to rooftop in his civilian clothes, tears streaming down his face as they mixed with the rain. His mind was a painful loop of beautiful memories shared with MJ, crying out in utter despair. After hours of wandering aimlessly in the cold, he finally dragged himself back to his miserable apartment. But the moment he stepped inside, a strange tingling sensation began spreading through his hands. His heart began racing violently, his vision blurred, and he collapsed unconscious onto the floor. The next morning, he woke up in a shock. He was completely encased in a thick, sticky spiderweb cocoon. As he frantically tore his way out of the organic shell, he realized he was actually suspended high up on the side of a building. He fell hard onto the alley floor below, gasping for air like a fish out of water. Utterly disoriented, he sneaked into a nearby laundromat to grab some clothes. He grabbed a random t-shirt and pants, which ended up being ridiculously small for him. The shirt looked like a crop top. He rushed back to his apartment only to find the entire room completely covered in thick layers of organic webbing. Peter stared in absolute disbelief, realizing that something fundamental was changing inside his body. He immediately ran a full diagnostic scan using his custom AI assistant. The AI delivered some mind-blowing results, explaining that his spider physiology had undergone a massive mutation. His superhuman senses had suddenly doubled in intensity, and his body had grown a brand new, specialized bone structure inside his wrists. This new biological development meant he could now generate and shoot organic webbing directly from his skin without needing mechanical web shooters. Peter was baffled and asked, "Why is this happening to me now?" The AI explained that a massive spike in his hormone levels, triggered by severe emotional trauma, had forced this evolutionary leap. This hormonal surge is a natural defense mechanism seen in arachnids under extreme stress. Peter put two and two together, realizing that seeing MJ happy with another man had shattered his heart so deeply that his body mutated. Frustrated and overwhelmed, he put on his suit and strapped his mechanical web shooters back on anyway. He decided to test out his gear to make sure everything was functioning, but as he flexed his wrist, an uncontrollable burst of organic webbing shot out of his skin. The raw pressure completely shattered his mechanical web shooter into tiny pieces, gluing the wreckage to the wall. He realized his old mechanical shooters were useless now. Since his body was now producing organic webs naturally, he tossed the broken tech aside. He headed up to the rooftop to get a proper handle on his upgraded powers. But the moment he stepped outside, a deafening wave of city noises flooded his brain. His heightened senses were operating at an overwhelming supernatural level. Trying to ignore the sensory overload, he practiced firing his new organic webs. At first, it shot out as a messy liquid substance that looked incredibly gross. After a few tries, he managed to shoot proper webs, but he had zero control over the release mechanism, unable to stop or start the flow at will. In the middle of this frustrating practice session, an emergency broadcast announced that Scorpion was currently running amok downtown, destroying everything in sight. Peter tried to swing to the location using his new organic webs, but his lack of control made it a clumsy, chaotic ride, causing him to crash land right in front of Scorpion. He had practically fallen off a massive skyscraper just to get there. Scorpion started mocking his incredibly clumsy entrance, but Spider-Man ignored the insults and immediately engaged him in combat. Despite feeling physically off, Peter fought hard, but he soon realized that the sinister body-hopping spirit was possessing Scorpion. The possessed Scorpion grabbed Peter and began beating him mercilessly. Under the intense physical pressure, Peter's nervous system went into overdrive. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they had turned pitch black. His adrenaline and hormones spiked to a dangerous maximum, causing him to lose all self-control. With his physical strength suddenly doubling, he grabbed Scorpion and slammed him violently against a police cruiser. He then ripped Scorpion's mechanical tail and arm completely off, pummeling him into unconsciousness. The spirit fled Gargan's body, but Detective Dire Wolf arrived just in time to witness Peter's terrifying, brutal display. She looked at Spider-Man as if he were a literal monster. In his blind rage, Peter hadn't realized that slamming Scorpion into the police car had severely injured an officer inside, leaving them fighting for their life. Horrified by his own actions, Peter frantically apologized to Dire Wolf, feeling deeply disturbed by his loss of control. Knowing he was a danger to everyone, Peter fled the scene. The next day, he decided he needed expert advice on how to manage an inner monster. The only person he knew who had mastered control over a raging beast was Dr. Bruce Banner, also known as the Hulk. Peter decided to attend one of Banner's public science lectures. During the lecture's Q&A session, a student in the audience stood up and asked a mind-bending question that made Peter stop and think. She asked, if Thanos' primary concern was that the universe was overpopulated and running out of resources, why didn't he just use the Infinity Gauntlet to double the resources instead of wiping out life? Why didn't he just create infinite resources to sustain everyone? Dr. Banner stood there speechless, unable to provide a logical answer to such a highly reasonable point. Once the lecture wrapped up and the crowd cleared out, Peter approached Bruce to speak with him in private about his personal struggle. Because of Doctor Strange's memory spell, Bruce had absolutely no memory of Peter Parker or his identity as Spider-Man. Peter introduced himself as a concerned student and asked, Dr. Banner, how did you manage to tame the Hulk? How do you prevent him from taking complete control of your body and transforming against your will? Bruce pulled out a small, highly advanced device and explained that it acts as a regulator, suppressing extreme biological spikes. Peter studied the device intently, asking detailed technical questions so he could replicate the technology for his own condition. Armed with this vital information, Peter thanked him and headed home. Back in his lab, Peter dove deep into research papers on arachnid biology and hormonal surges. Working tirelessly through the night, he began constructing a modified version of Banner's regulator, a sleek, small collar device designed to attach directly to his neck to suppress his erratic and dangerous superhuman surges. This device was engineered to keep his biological mutations stable. After hours of precise calibration, the regulator was finally complete. He placed it onto his neck, turned it on, and felt an instant wave of relief as his racing heart and unstable hormone levels finally leveled out. Confident, he strapped his web shooters back on. He attempted to take a test swing across the rooftops, hoping to feel normal again. But the moment he launched, the device malfunctioned under the physical strain, causing his hormones to spike wildly once more. He lost control mid-air and crashed heavily onto the street. He realized the regulator still needed major modifications. Before he could head back to his workshop, the mysterious body-hopping spirit appeared again, possessing an ordinary civilian nearby. The possessed man approached Spider-Man, sneering, "Why do you protect damage control? They are kidnapping and experimenting on special people like us who possess unique powers." Peter defended them, saying, "They only detain individuals who pose a threat to public safety." The possessed host replied, "I only want one thing from them, and then I'll leave them alone." Peter demanded, "You mean VMAX? Tell me what VMAX is right now." The host laughed darkly, saying, "If you stand in my way, you'll force me to hurt MJ." The spirit immediately abandoned the host and began rapidly leaping from one civilian to another down the crowded street. Realizing the entity was heading straight to kidnap MJ, Peter swung after it in a panic while instructing his AI assistant to analyze the exact range and limitations of the spirit's body-hopping abilities. As Peter chased the flickering energy from person to person, his AI assistant completed the calculations. The system reported that the spirit's maximum jumping distance was exactly 10 meters. If there was no human host within a 10-meter radius, the entity would be physically trapped in its current body. Armed with this crucial information, Peter trapped the possessed host in an open area, preventing them from getting close to anyone. Realizing the danger, Peter raced directly to MJ's apartment, bursting through her window. MJ shrieked in absolute terror at the sudden intrusion of the famous web-slinger. Peter pleaded, "There's no time to explain. You are in extreme danger from a body-snatching entity, and I need to get you to safety right now." Sensing his genuine urgency, MJ trusted him and took his hand. Peter swung her up to the safety of a high skyscraper rooftop, apologizing for scaring her so badly. He explained he was only trying to protect her from a dangerous threat. MJ stared at him, suddenly asking him to remove his mask. Hesitant but hopeful, Peter pulled his mask off. MJ gasped and cried out, "Peter, I remember you!" She threw her arms around him in a tight hug, but a split second later, her voice distorted eerily. The entity sneered through MJ's lips. "Did you honestly think she remembered you? She has absolutely no memory of you at all." Peter's heart shattered as he realized the malevolent spirit had already possessed MJ before he even arrived on the scene. To make matters worse, the entity forced MJ's body to step off the edge of the building. Peter dove after her without hesitation, catching her in mid-air just feet from the pavement. He held her tightly in his arms, trembling with fear and helplessness. The spirit exited MJ's body and entered a nearby taxi driver. The possessed driver stopped the car, rolled down the window, and mockingly asked, "So, are you going to stop chasing me now?" Realizing he couldn't risk the lives of innocent people, Peter raised his hands in surrender, agreeing to back off. The possessed driver smirked and drove away. However, as the taxi pulled away, Peter noticed a young girl sitting silently in the back seat. He quickly snapped a photo of her face and saved it on his device. A few moments later, MJ regained consciousness. Peter gently explained the situation to her, carefully keeping his identity hidden, presenting himself strictly as Spider-Man protecting a civilian. Knowing she wasn't safe alone, he decided to take her to the one person who could keep her safe from anything, Frank Castle. He brought MJ to Frank's hideout, located inside a massive abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. As they stepped inside, they had to navigate a deadly maze of highly sophisticated security traps. Every step they took triggered another lethal countermeasure, nearly getting them blown up or impaled at every turn. Just as they were about to trigger a final fatal trap, Frank Castle emerged from the shadows. He had personally set up this gauntlet to keep unwanted guests out. Initially, the Punisher refused to play babysitter to MJ, but after Peter begged him, emphasizing her danger, Frank reluctantly agreed and let them into his secure bunker. Once they settled in, Spider-Man pulled up his laptop and showed them the photo of the young girl from the taxi. He explained his theory. "I believe she is the puppet master orchestrating these mind control attacks from a distance." Every database search on her identity comes up completely blank or heavily classified. He added, I've uploaded her face to a global recognition tracker, so the moment she passes any city camera, we'll locate her. Everyone agreed with the plan. Peter then mentioned he needed to go home to finish building his power regulator. Frank stopped him, saying, No need to risk going out. I have all the tools you need right here. Frank showed him into a fully equipped workshop filled with advanced gear. As Peter worked on modifying his regulator, MJ sat nearby, and they ended up sharing a deep, meaningful conversation. Peter felt a surge of happiness just being near her, and during their chat, he subtly learned that things weren't going well with her new boyfriend. Hearing that her relationship was on the rocks gave Peter a secret glimmer of hope. MJ then offered to help him troubleshoot the engineering issues with his regulator device. Working closely together, they successfully managed to calibrate the hardware, making the stabilizer fully functional and ready for deployment. He clipped the completed regulator onto his neck, and this time it worked perfectly, keeping his unstable powers fully in check. Peter decided to construct a second duplicate device, intending to use it to neutralize the mind-controlling girl. The next morning, Frank walked in to find Peter fast asleep, clutching a letter. It was the very same letter Peter had written long ago, intending to explain everything to MJ and restore her memories, which he had never found the courage to deliver. Frank looked at the sleeping hero and advised him, saying, Kid, just tell her the truth. Keeping secrets like this will only bring you endless pain and misery. Before Peter could respond to Frank's heavy advice, his laptop suddenly let out a loud alert. The facial recognition software had successfully located the mysterious girl. She was spotted at none other than the damage control headquarters. Peter immediately grabbed his gear and rushed out, with MJ watching him leave. MJ turned to Frank and pleaded, You have to go help him. He can't handle this threat all on his own. Frank realized she was completely right, grabbed his heavy weapons, and headed out to back up Spider-Man. Meanwhile, at the damage control facility, the mysterious girl had already unleashed absolute devastation. The destruction was so severe that Bill and his surviving security personnel had locked themselves inside a heavily armored bunker. The girl searched the digital archives for VMAX, but found nothing. She hacked the security monitors to face Bill, coldly stating, My name is Jean Grey, and you know exactly who I am and what I want. For those who aren't familiar with the name Jean Grey, she is an incredibly powerful mutant born with immense telepathic and telekinetic abilities. Back at the damage control facility, Spider-Man finally arrived, surveying the absolute ruin she had caused. He cautiously stepped through the debris, searching for the dangerous mutant. Suddenly, Jean Grey materialized right in front of him. Before Peter could say a single word, she coldly said, Save your breath. Here, catch. She tossed a familiar device to him. It was Bruce Banner's power regulator. Peter's heart sank as he realized that without his regulator, Bruce had transformed into the Hulk, completely under Jean's mind control. In an instant, the raging Savage Hulk lunged out of the shadows, savage and completely under Jean's absolute mental dominance, which explained how she had demolished the entire facility so easily. Jean sat back calmly, watching with an icy gaze as her possessed green giant grabbed Spider-Man, preparing to crush him once and for all. Peter was getting absolutely pulverized by the monster, and no matter how hard he tried to land a decent punch, his efforts were completely useless. That was until Uncle Frank made his grand entrance, armed to the teeth with heavy military weaponry, unleashing a relentless barrage of fire right at Hulk. To top it off, they lobbed a massive bomb straight at him, triggering a colossal explosion that finally broke Jean's telepathic grip over Bruce Banner. Right after that chaos, Frank went off searching for Jean to put handcuffs on her, while Peter rushed over to check on Bruce. To his relief, Bruce had finally snapped out of it and reverted back to his normal human self. Peter immediately tried to hook him up to the suppressor device he built to keep the green monster locked away, but unfortunately, the Hulk was way too quick and wrestled back control. He takes over Bruce completely, undergoing a full-blown transformation into that wild, unstoppable, rampaging Hulk we all know from back in the day. This time, he grabs a hold of Peter and starts absolutely pounding him with every single ounce of his monstrous strength. Peter desperately looks over his shoulder, hoping to spot Frank coming to the rescue, but instead, he realizes something terrible. It turns out Jean has completely brainwashed Frank, and she is currently busy blowing up the entire fortress where Bill is trapped inside. Peter is totally cut off from helping them, forced to deal with Hulk's insane fury. As Hulk violently smashes the structure around them, Peter has to improvise quickly, grabbing massive chunks of falling concrete and securing them with his webs. He hurls these heavy concrete blocks over the edge, using them as an anchor to suspend Hulk in mid-air. Suddenly, the Hulk feels this immense downward gravitational pull dragging him down, yet he still manages to grab Peter in a death grip, ready to squash him like a bug. In a desperate final attempt, Peter appeals directly to Dr. Bruce Banner's humanity, which thankfully works as Bruce remembers his friend and starts to calm down. To avoid inflicting any more harm on Peter, Bruce makes the ultimate sacrifice by throwing himself off the massive ledge, plummeting to the ground. He obviously survives the fall, but the shock forces him back into his human form. Meanwhile, Peter dashes over to the fortress to rescue Bill, only to find that Jean has completely breached the defenses and cornered him. Moving with lightning-fast agility, Peter springs forward and slaps the suppressor device right onto the back of her neck, instantly neutralizing her telepathic abilities. Sensing an opening, Bill immediately shoots her with a powerful sedative, causing Jean to lose consciousness. But just as her eyes flutter closed, she whispers one specific name directly to Peter. She says the name Sarah, right before completely blacking out. Soon after, Frank finally snaps out of his trance, and it looks like the immediate crisis is thankfully averted. Before long, the authorities arrive at the scene to clean up the wreckage, transporting Bruce to the hospital for medical care while taking Jean straight into secure custody. Bill is incredibly grateful and thanks Peter profusely for saving his life, but Peter informs him that he wants to personally interrogate Jean to get some answers. Bill gladly agrees to help him out with this request. Bill says, "You got it, buddy. As soon as she opens her eyes, I'll give you a call." Peter then questions him about the name Sarah that Jean kept repeating before she collapsed. Bill quickly brushes it off, claiming it was probably just a random name he was thinking of while she was controlling his mind, suggesting it got stuck in her subconscious. Peter listens to this explanation. He hears this excuse and honestly feels highly skeptical about it, but he decides to keep his mouth shut for now and leaves the area. Peter heads straight back to Frank's secret hideout, only to run face first into a devastating new shock. It turns out MJ found and read the heartfelt letter Peter had accidentally left sitting right in front of the laptop, and she is absolutely stunned by what she discovered. She is completely shell-shocked to learn that they actually had a deep history and loved each other passionately in the past, and that Peter chose to keep her in the dark after casting the mind-wiping spell. With tears in his eyes, a heartbroken Peter tries to explain, telling her that he only did it because he was terrified of losing her and Ned, just like he tragically lost his beloved Aunt May. He explains that because Aunt May was his family and so close to his heart, her death broke him, and he simply couldn't bear the thought of losing anyone else he loved. MJ listens and genuinely understands that his actions came from a place of pure protection, but then she drops a heavy bomb, saying, "I'm so sorry, Peter, but I honestly don't feel any connection to you. All of these memories you speak of mean nothing to me." She continues, "I don't have a single recollection of any of it. I really appreciate you saving my life, but I think it's best if I leave now." Our poor hero is absolutely devastated, but being the gentleman he is, he still offers to walk her all the way back to her apartment. Once they arrive, MJ tries to show a little gratitude, asking him, "Hey, why don't you come upstairs and hang out for a bit?" She suggests, "You can hang out with Ned and me, and we can all just relax and enjoy some company together." Peter absolutely leaps at the opportunity, eagerly heading upstairs with her. The second Ned catches sight of Peter, he is practically jumping with joy. Not because his memories returned, but because he is a massive Spider-Man fanboy who always wanted to meet him. So Peter keeps his mask on, sitting down to chat and joke around with them. They play games and talk for hours, and during their conversation, Peter drops a few subtle questions that confirm MJ has absolutely no recollection of anything that happened while she was under Jean's telepathic influence. This realization hits Peter like a ton of bricks. Bill completely lied to his face about Sarah when he claimed that the name just randomly leaked from his mind during the possession, since victims don't retain memories. Bill claimed that Sarah was just a name floating in his head while Jean was controlling him, but since mind control wipes the host's memory of the event, Bill shouldn't have remembered anything at all. Realizing Bill is a dirty liar, Peter immediately slips away and calls Yelena Belova, the Black Widow, asking her to dig up any files linking a woman named Jean Grey with a girl named Sarah. Yelena gets back to him quickly, confirming that, yes, Bill's shady command center actually abducted this girl named Sarah several years ago. They locked her up in a high-tech facility to perform highly unethical experiments on her, trying to dissect the source of her immense abilities and study how her mind control powers worked. To make matters even more shocking, Yelena reveals that this poor captive girl, Sarah, is actually Jean Grey's younger sister. The moment Peter hears this mind-blowing truth, a wave of guilt washes over him. He realizes he completely misjudged Jean, who was just trying to rescue her family, while Bill is the true villain of this story. He quickly says goodbye to MJ and Ned, rushing straight to the research facility. Inside the facility, we see poor Jean bound tightly and completely knocked out from the sedatives. While she is trapped in her unconscious state, she begins to relive a heartbreaking and painful memory of her and her sister. In the flashback, Jean is sitting in a peaceful park with Sarah, who, as it turns out, possessed mind control abilities that were even more formidable than Jean's own. Sarah was patiently teaching Jean how to harness her telepathic projection to influence people over long distances. Just as their little training session wrapped up, Sarah smiled and said she was going to grab them some ice cream. But the second she walked away, she was hit with a tranquilizer dart as Bill's strike team ambushed her, dragging her away in handcuffs right in front of a horrified Jean. Jean desperately ran to save her sister, but a semi-conscious Sarah used her remaining telepathic strength to take control of Jean, forcing her to run away in the opposite direction so she would remain safe. When Jean finally regained her senses, she was miles away. Realizing her sister had been taken, she has spent every single day since then searching frantically for her. Back in the present, Jean slowly opens her eyes inside the facility, finding herself trapped inside a heavily reinforced glass containment cell designed to block her psychic waves. Bill and his scientists are standing at a very safe distance so she can't hijack their minds. Glaring at him, Jean demands, "Tell me where the VMAX facility is right now, speak up." Bill shrugs dismissively and replies, "What is this VMAX thing you people keep bringing up? I honestly have no idea what you're talking about." Right then, the head scientist standing next to Bill initiates a series of agonizing and highly stressful neural tests on Jean. Through these intense neurological scans, they begin to realize that this VMAX word she keeps repeating is actually a telepathic breadcrumb that Sarah managed to beam over to her sister to guide her to this location. Bill is absolutely fascinated by the raw potential of their combined psychic abilities, so he cold-heartedly orders the scientists to crank up the machine's power, subjecting Jean to even more extreme torture just so they can gather more scientific data. While screaming in absolute agony, Jean looks up at the ceiling and notices the letters VMAX etched directly onto the ventilation shaft. Glancing at the floor, she spots her sister's distinctive hair clip, confirming that Sarah was indeed held captive in this exact room and left those clues behind. With tears in her eyes, she looks at Bill and demands answers. She asks him one last time, "Where is my sister?" Bill smugly reveals that they pushed Sarah to her absolute limits during their torturous experiments, just like they are doing to her now, in order to extract her powers, which unfortunately ended up killing her. Hearing this devastating news, Jean snaps, unleashing an absolutely colossal wave of raw psychic energy from deep within. This massive shockwave allows her to seize total control over every single living being within a multi-kilometer radius. Fortunately, Frank is positioned just outside this telepathic danger zone, but he watches in horror as Jean's energy forms an ominous dome over the area, enslaving everyone trapped beneath it. He decides he has to take immediate action to neutralize her. Realizing the threat she poses, he grabs a high-powered sniper rifle, scales a nearby skyscraper, and sets up his position to take her out from long distance with a single clean shot. Meanwhile, Peter finally arrives at the research facility, stepping inside only to be completely creeped out by the eerie sight of all the staff frozen in place like statues under her spell. He pushes forward through the silent corridors until he is just outside the chamber where Jean is held. Suddenly, Jean telepathically commands a group of hand ninjas to ambush and attack him. Throughout this brutal and chaotic skirmish, Jean speaks to Peter directly through the mouths of the ninjas, yelling, "You don't understand a thing, Spider-Man. We are nothing but tools to them." She continues, "They kidnap us and treat us like expendable lab rats. We have no value in their eyes." To prove that Peter is just as vulnerable and targeted as she is, she brainwashes a guard and has him fire a specialized high-tech weapon at Peter's webbing, instantly disintegrating it into dust. She then warns him, "These people have engineered weapons specifically designed to neutralize you." She screams, "I lost my sister because of their greed, and I won't stop until they all pay the price." In her rage, she telepathically drags Bill over, forcing him to sit before her as she hovers dozens of sharp glass shards in the air, slowly creeping them closer to his face centimeter by centimeter to torture him. She wants him to suffer a slow, agonizing death. Peter refuses to stand by and watch, jumping back into the fray, but the hand ninjas are simply too numerous and incredibly skilled, eventually overwhelming him and slamming him hard onto the floor. As he lies there bruised, beaten, and losing hope, Jean looks down and says, "Wake up, Peter. People like us can never have normal lives." She cold-heartedly adds, "We will never have family or friends. We are destined to be nothing but test subjects in their sterile labs forever." But in that dark moment, Peter's mind flashes to memories of Aunt May, MJ, Ned, and all the warm, beautiful moments they shared. He realizes that these are precious people who make life worth living, and they are absolutely worth fighting to protect. Without wasting another second, he reaches up and violently rips the power-suppressing regulator device off his neck, unleashing an immediate, massive surge of adrenaline and raw power through his veins. He leaps back onto his feet with unmatched fury, launching a devastating counterattack against the hand ninjas with such incredible force that he sends the entire squad flying through the air in one move. He fires off a massive web net, pinning all the scattered ninjas securely to the walls in an instant. With the path finally clear, Peter walks directly up to Jean, pleading with her and trying to convince her that she is a much better person than the monstrous Bill, and that she doesn't need to sink to his level by murdering him. This time, Jean decides to delve deep into Peter's mind. Utilizing her vastly amplified psychic abilities, she easily bypasses his mental defenses to see what lies within his soul. Deep inside Peter's memories, Jean witnesses the loving presence of Aunt May, the woman who raised him and loved him like her own son. She feels a profound warmth and unconditional kindness, the likes of which she has never experienced in her own painful life. This emotional revelation makes her realize that despite the tragedy, love still exists in this world, and her destructive quest for vengeance is utterly pointless. In this shared psychic landscape, Peter's projection gently approaches her, comforting her by saying, "Even though you feel completely isolated and alone after losing your sister, please know that I am here for you." Hearing those words of comfort, Jean's rage finally dissolves, and she decides to spare Bill's life as her telepathic dome over the city begins to evaporate. But just as peace is restored, Peter's heightened spider sense picks up the sound of Frank's sniper bullet tearing through the air towards Jean. Without a second thought, he lunges forward, shoving her aside and taking the bullet directly in the chest. By taking that bullet, Peter proves to Jean that true goodness exists and that everyone deserves a second chance. Jean frantically tries to tend to his wound, but he is bleeding out rapidly and slipping away. Desperate to save him, she gathers every ounce of her remaining telepathic power to manually stimulate his vital organs and keep him alive until help arrives. Just then, Frank bursts in. Seeing what happened, a guilt-ridden Frank scoops Peter up and rushes him to the emergency room. The immediate crisis settles, and Jean quietly slips away into the night. Within days, word spreads like wildfire that Spider-Man is fighting for his life in the hospital. Since the citizens absolutely adore their friendly neighborhood hero, the entire city is thrown into a state of deep worry. There's a somber mood hanging over New York as everyone anxiously prays for a miracle, hoping Peter makes a full recovery. Thankfully, things start looking up, largely because Jean has been secretly using her telepathic abilities from afar to help stabilize his body and accelerate his healing process. The moment she senses he is finally out of danger, she quietly withdraws her psychic link and vanishes. She disappears completely without leaving a trace. When Peter finally opens his eyes, he sees a loyal Frank sitting right by his bedside, having refused to leave his side for a single second. Peter panics upon realizing his mask is off, but Frank reassures him, saying, "Relax, kid, nobody else has seen your face. Your secret is safe with me." Frank then delivers a heartfelt apology for accidentally shooting him. He explains that he is incredibly grateful for Peter's selflessness, declaring that they are officially partners and friends from here on out. To cheer him up, Frank rolls him over to the window to show him the massive crowd of grateful citizens gathered outside the hospital, holding candles and praying for his recovery. Peter is deeply touched by this beautiful sight, but realizes he needs to leave. Frank tells him, "Don't sweat it, kid. I've got a brilliant plan to get you out of here unnoticed." He has Peter dress in normal civilian clothes and simply walk out the front door, blending in seamlessly with the crowd. Meanwhile, Frank puts on the Spider-Man mask and waves energetically to the crowd from the high hospital window, drawing everyone's attention away from the ground level. Believing that the hero is still up in his room, the crowd erupts in cheers for Spider-Man, allowing Peter to slip away entirely unnoticed. And with that clever trick, the whole ordeal finally wraps up, and Peter heads back home. A few days later, Peter is sitting in a local cafe when he spots his old pal Ned walking in. He is about to leave, but changes his mind. He decides it's finally time to walk up to him, introduce himself, and slowly rebuild their legendary bond. He approaches Ned with a warm smile, doing their classic secret handshake and sharing inside jokes from their past, which instantly sparks a sense of familiarity in Ned. It's a deeply emotional conclusion to a fantastic film that is absolutely packed with heart, even if the plot beats feel a bit familiar. While it might not completely reinvent the wheel storytelling-wise, you can't help but adore it because, at the end of the day, it's Spider-Man, and we will always have a special place in our hearts for him. But stick around, because the post-credits scene drops a massive bombshell. Ned's customized Spider-Man tracking program suddenly lights up, picking up a bizarre, unexplainable signal. The software detects a second Spider-Man signature, but it's originating from a location incredibly far away from Earth, deep in outer space. Could this be a parallel universe, or maybe a completely different planet altogether? Only time will tell. We are definitely going to dive much deeper into these wild Marvel theories in our upcoming breakdowns, so get ready. As we piece more clues together, we will finally uncover the true meaning behind this mysterious intergalactic signal. It is going to be an absolutely wild ride,